All right, welcome to our panel on the agentic web in the corporate and enterprise world. The prior panel laid out some of the foundations, and now we'll dive deeper into corporate and enterprise opportunities, use cases, barriers, and strategies to drive adoption. My name is Jukka Alanen, and I'll be moderating this panel. I'm founder and managing partner of Rebellion Ventures, which we call the Autonomy Fund. We back founders that are building autonomous operations and systems in industry verticals like healthcare, finance, logistics, and commerce. And I was invited to moderate this panel as my focus is on the future of autonomous systems and agentic AI in enterprise and how they can transform business models and processes. And I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we'll dive into the corporate and enterprise world. So we have Gunjan Sinha. Gunjan is the founder and chairman of Open Growth Ventures, which is a venture studio. And he brings a long-term perspective from the early days of the internet, software as a service, and evolution of AI. We have Piyush Saxena. Piyush is SVP and global head of Google Business Unit for HCL Tech, which is a large global technology and services provider with over 200,000 employees. And then we have Rao Suraprayani, who is VP and GM of Business Application Platform for Cloud AI at Google Cloud. So we're going to get started and dive into the corporate problems. It's always good to get started first and grounded with customer problems before we talk more about the technology and what is needed to make these things happen. So let's start with you, Piyush. What enterprise pain points do you think are best suited for an agentic web approach, where they might be able to either solve some of the limitations of traditional AI and automation or enable entirely new use cases?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have the pleasure of working with multiple customers globally who are in different stages of their agentic adoption. And one key difference between traditional automation and agentic is the ability of agentic to take, be self-aware, autonomous, and be in a position to take actions, right? So most of the customers are looking at how can they impact two key areas. One is how can they accelerate the business outcomes, or how can they reduce the operational cost. Right, I will just take a quick example of accelerating business outcomes, which will give you clarity in terms of what customers are expecting, very early stage of adoption. There's a manufacturing customer, right? They want to bring in predictive defect detection using a multi-agent, solution. And typically, if there is a steel manufacturing happening and there are scratches in the steel plates, it costs the customer a lot of additional effort to take care of this. So with the help of Vision AI and manufacturing data engine from Google Cloud, we are able to build a network of agents. First agent looks at what is happening on the plate. So it's the vision part. Second one looks at the root cause analysis and suggests the recommendations to solve the problem. Third one gives the dashboard so that the engineers can look at it. And the fourth one is the resolution agent. And the fifth one is the orchestrator, which manages all these. So using this network of agents, you are able to predict and do the defect correction. So that's the kind of use case.
And Rao, how about you? How do you look at this from your perspective and Google's?
Yeah, thank you. So broadly, we're looking at three themes that are emerging in how customers deploy agents. One is being able to go from a task-oriented execution to a goal-directed execution. So previously, it used to be you would write a variety of scripts, automate a very specific flow, but now you can actually state the goal you want to accomplish and then let the agent kind of deal with some of the subtle variations along the path. So think of that as a task focus to a goal focus completion of a workflow. So that's one theme that's emerging as customers deploy agents. The second one is something that I use every day, deep research. with this current reasoning capability, the agents are now able to collect, collate, and to synthesize lots of disparate information, summarize it, and reduce that cognitive load for me. I use that every day for a variety of tasks, whether it's a market analysis or product management, insights, whatever I'm trying to do, I consider, can I benefit by applying deep research in this? So that's the second scenario where I'm seeing it take off very well. And third one that's emerging is about hyper-personalization. It used to be, I suppose it still is to some extent, you need to collect lots of data signals, and only the major companies used to be able to do it effectively. Now with LLMs, you're able to provide few samples because the world knowledge is already embedded in the LLM. You're able to provide that and apply hyper-personalized experiences for your consumers. So I would say those are generally the three themes I'm seeing emerge out of all the agent deployments. There's plenty more, but we can talk about it.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So Gunjan, from your perspective and your experience, what would you add to that, either in terms of customer problems or then thinking about value to customers and where the either near-term opportunities are or where might the transformative possibilities lie going forward?
Yeah, no, and let me touch on some of the transformative abilities, because we tend to look at the world from what we have seen before. That's just the mental model. And I can just give a data point from 1994 when I was building the first search engine, Who, which was the first internet directory. We just had a hard time getting off the phone books, because that's what you've seen before. But the challenge that we sit here is that we have to rethink, get out of what I call the system of record, the workflow systems, to a new modality of how this agentic web is actually going to do and what it's capable of doing. So first and foremost, that's an important lens to apply. So, for example, when you think about the agents, they have to not just do the act, they have to explain their act. Because that explainability is going to be part of their accountability besides driving the goal or the outcome. There is a LLM access, and there's a code that's part of the agent that's there. So even if you have a swarm of agents or even a group of agents doing things, so the explainability becomes important. Then you have to start to think about the traceability, but also what kind of legal recourse that you have that, if actions are taken and you want to come back three months later, how do you hold these agents accountable for their actions, and who's accountable? Are they the agents or are they the humans behind the agents who are part of that experience that actually underwent? So there's layers of those things that have to be built, but when that happens, and when it's designed and architected correctly, what I feel is it's going to actually reduce friction in ways that we have not experienced. So when people talk about digital twins, I'm not a big fan of digital twins because humans are humans and humans are going to be special. And the minions that, last session people were talking about, they're going to stay as agents. But if you design this right, a lot of the explainability, a lot of the regulatory stuff, the friction points should be facilitated by the agents. That is the right architecture in my mind, beyond just the productivity gains that we're getting in the near term, but you've got to build that CIO architecture, the technology architecture to get there.
How about Piyush, when you and Agentic, when you are working with clients on big AI strategies and implementations and new initiatives, how do you think about transformative value and what the big unlocks or needle movers are?
Yeah. So most of the customers, as I earlier talked about, are in very different stages of adoption. Again, I will take one example. This is a banking customer, and they want the entire banking operations to be run using a suite of agents, around 200,000 agents, right? And that's the vision, right? They are just starting. And as we discussed in some of the earlier, in the previous session, to get to that vision, there is a lot of steps to be taken. So we'll come to those steps. But in terms of some of the transformative benefits that these customers are looking at is, for example, the manufacturing customer I talked about. They are looking at an ROI of $170,000 saving per plant per month, right, through that predictive defect detection. So in a manufacturing customer, for example, if there are, say, 100 plants, it's kind of a 17 million saving per annum for that kind of a customer. So it's not only you are able to release the products earlier, but you are also able to predict and correct the defects, which results in a lot of cost savings. Right? At the back end, there are a lot of cost involved in terms of running these agents on cloud, building these agents. All this is baked in when I talk about these kind of an ROI. So across industries, that's where customers are looking at. They are looking at what value they can get out of these deployments and what kind of ROI can be delivered.
Maybe I'll add a couple of things.
Go ahead.
Gunjan is spot on. In terms of most of the companies, they look at the current problems, processes, and operations and see how we can be more efficient and effective, right? Which is great. Gives you some quick ROI based on the processes and systems you already understand. But the transformative possibilities are when you look at it from what would I do if I were to start a company now? A neo AI company that can operate with agents everywhere. Can I operate a zero FTE department? Can I accomplish my tasks with just the agents and where I'm running the entire thing by myself, right? So thinking about those kind of things, especially when you're starting from scratch, reimagining those processes that you assumed are, we have to do it, right? But then in the agentic world, can you rethink and reimagine those aspects? That's one aspect. Then from a people point of view, you have to train the people to operate in a human plus AI or agent world, where it is, you have to be preparing your organization and your teams to execute in that mode. And I'm definitely seeing that in a more smaller companies, but the larger companies are taking some time. We have plenty of initiatives across the organizations that I work with. But again, existing process systems important. We need to keep those in mind, but also finding those opportunities where you can operate like one of those neo AI companies is going to be key to transforming your organization.
And you all touched on opportunities for transformative value one way or another, which often requires thinking from the ground up, redefining business models or processes. When you think about, Rao, the agentic web and what is needed from a technical building block perspective, I know you've been spending a lot of time thinking about that. We've got things like MCP, A2A, and others already there. How do you see the role that they play in interoperability, and what else is needed to really build out the agentic web and make it work for enterprises?
I mean, there's a lot. I mean, we're still in the early innings of the overall agentic operationalization, right? Yes, we do need MCP is great. It's been amazing evolution from making easy for accessing data and for tools. Works great. But as you imagine the stack being built up from data to APIs to applications to agents, there is more intelligence at the top layer, and the communication between agents should be no different from communication between humans. Natural language, task and context focused, and with semantic understanding of what's happening. So that's the genesis of agent-to-agent protocol from a technology point of view. There's also a bit of a business context to how I came about the A2A and how we pushed on it, is you have a variety of enterprises that have either data moat or the logic or their business process understanding that's their secret sauce. They will provide the best agent out of the box if they understand the process and the domain. For a customer, you want to have the ability to interoperate across these agents so that they can unlock the end-to-end value. So that's really the business context in which A2A becomes powerful. It's not just a technology part. A company can retain their value and expose the intelligence and generate value based on the outcomes, not just expose the data and hope that they can survive through this agentic transition. So that's a little bit of background on MCP and A2A, how we think about it. Now, those two are great, but ultimately you still need that end-to-end system where agents are able to discover other agents, which leads to a registry. It needs to be a federated registry so that you can have disparate systems also talk to each other. Being able to invoke securely, which means now you need identity and security, being able to track what's going on. Then comes the observability, auditability, and non-repudiation. Right? So all of these challenges, one kind of cheat code I had was scoping A2A to enterprise. My focus to start A2A for enterprise was to say we can solve this intra-business, where when a user logs in and delegates the task to an agent, the user's credentials are transferring over to the agent. So all of your security, identification, auditability, they're all you get that for free within an enterprise. Now, as you cross from with intra-business to B2B to B2C to the consumer world, and this is where MIT Nanda and others are playing a big role, these problems become much more hairy. Right? So you have a decentralized identity, a decentralized authentication. So we're starting to solve those problems across the agentic system. But that's really the evolution of it. Starting with the discovery, registry, being able to identify and invoke securely, and once it is operating, being able to audit and then govern with guardrails. So you need plumbing across the entire solution to enable this at scale.
If I can
go ahead,
build on this in terms of how adoption is happening in the enterprise space, and Rao did talk about some of the challenges. But when we are talking to the enterprise customers, most of these use cases are being deployed in a controlled environment, right? And the controlled environment is typically cleaned up, right? You have the right data, you have the right use cases already identified, you have support of multiple teams, and therefore it is very easy to deliver value in that particular controlled environment. But imagine, a cross supply chain use case. Earlier, I talked about the manufacturing one that is also in a controlled environment. And now when we go to a scale AI use case, now these agents, have to talk to, as Rao said, I will just take few names. It could have been a good question for the panel on the previous panel. So, from the CRM point of view, data has to be collected from an agent in Salesforce, right? And so one of the agents has to talk to the Salesforce agent, and then from the process point of view, it has to talk to the ServiceNow agent. Now, there is this big challenge while we have the right protocols in place, but in terms of how these agents are going to talk to each other and how these are being controlled is something which enterprise still need to understand before it can be, executed in an enterprise environment.
Yeah, and that's a great distinction between the intra-enterprise controlled environments versus going outside the boundaries of the enterprise into, across, basically between companies as well as into the consumer ecosystem, and then the complexities and challenges and what's needed will go up significantly. Now, Gunnin, you've seen a lot of different things in terms of what might hold back, what might be barriers to new technology developments. How do you think about the key barriers that we need to anticipate and maybe mitigate or take care of on the way to agentic web for enterprises?
Yeah, and this is a topic I've been thinking about a lot. I'll tell you, if you look at each of the foundational models, and naturally so, they're all thinking about themselves as the gateway. Just like Amazon is a gateway for 1 billion suppliers who are supplying the stuff, Amazon is the frontal gateway to that. Same things, whether you look at OpenAI, whether you might look at Anthropic, Gemini, everything else, everybody is that gateway. So the question that fundamentally comes in how do you think about the user, the creator, the human? Because they have the context, they have the expertise, they have the knowledge. And a lot of AI is about garbage in, garbage out. So, if I train with 200 versions of my PowerPoint, which are all wrong, guess what's going to come out at the other end? So the problem isn't the student, the problem is the book. If the book is wrong, the student will, of course, be off. So part of what we have to figure out is the strategy of how we think about the real expertise, the real content, the real data, that's actually coming together to then train. And that layer is a layer should, in many which ways, should be independent of the foundational models, because that provides for general portability and general kind of value and innovation as an ecosystem. Because it's not just, what we observe here in the United States, with the world geopolitics right now, there's going to be models that are going to be working in Indonesia and something different working in China or India or everywhere else. So this is a part of the infrastructure, which is something has to be thought of, which I don't see that. And you can think of it as a barrier. You can also think of it as an opportunity for innovation that this group should reflect on?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
So, and looking at these barriers, how do we, from the technology adoption point of view, I think everyone is clear that technology is going to deliver the outcomes. But how to get there is something which, and in what time you get there is something which everyone is currently challenged with. It happened during the cloud migration also, right, where everyone migrated to the cloud, but then they realized that somebody needs to take care of FinOps, somebody needs to take care of monitoring and securing those instances in cloud. Similarly, in agentic adoption world, there are three layers which we are looking at. One is the infrastructure readiness, which in most of the enterprise customers it is there. Then Gunjan talked about the data readiness. I think that's a big challenge most of the customers are facing. And then on top of that, you have the agentic layer, which is more of agent operations, right? So that's where customers need to think through that in an enterprise world, even if you have the first two layers addressed, what is going to be your framework of running agentic operations in your environment? How are you going to govern? And we have talked a lot about this, so I will not overemphasize on this, but governance, security, observability, measurement, performance, onboarding of a new agent, who is responsible for doing all this within the organization. All those things are which form the agentic operations layer, which customers need to address.
And Rao, you touched earlier on some of the building blocks that might be needed when you go outside of the corporate boundaries into the broader ecosystem. How do you see the future infrastructure and the role of things like MIT's Project Nanda in terms of helping the ecosystem assemble some of the pieces needed there?
So a little bit building off of what my colleagues are saying here, the two, I guess, analogies I use as I think through these problems. Chief Agent Officer, totally made up title, and then agent as an intern. Okay? So if you deploy an agent, you onboard an agent, you don't trust it enough. You trust it just enough to do a little bit of a tiny task. But with time, with practice, as the agent or the intern gains experience, they're able to do more tasks. You delegate more. You give them more autonomy to do things. And the agent is unable to accomplish something, it needs to check with the manager or somebody who can guide it through the process. Right? So thinking through that process, how can I enable that in automated fashion with reinforcement learning, being able to audit where it's getting it right, where it's getting it incorrect, where the agent needs human in the loop to take that next step. Understanding all of these and feeding it back into the agent so that it can now do more things autonomously. So that is what is needed to enable that automation and the agentic world. Yeah. Now that is, I talk about it in terms of an enterprise, but similar thing in a more of a Internet of Agents world. Once you cross into the consumer world, now you're talking about commerce, you're talking about payments. We're talking about how can everybody have an agent, a personal agent. My personal agent feels like, or I feel like getting cake. Who are those local stores that can sell it to me, right? So do they have? So imagine the world where you have actually agents available for you, and you're able to delegate the tasks that you're looking to accomplish to your personal agent. Assuming that world, what are the tools that are needed? Now you need the ability to identify. So you're looking, partnering with MIT Nanda in some of the more advanced things that they're looking at, more in terms of Horizon 2, even Horizon 3 ideas, starting with the decentralized identity. And along with that comes authentication and non-repudiation, all the security aspects of it. And then scaling to Internet of Agents. Yes, enterprise can have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of agents, but now we're talking about planet scale. And that's something Google is amazing at. So we're starting to look at how we scale to that with federated registries, and how that same, just like what I talked about within an enterprise, how does it scale for that consumer world of agentic web?
On a lighter note, I just want to share one of the things my colleague shared, that she wants to have two agents, one a professional avatar and one a personal avatar, like you're talking about. But she wants to ensure that these two never talk to each other.
Now, just to add to, so when I look at kind of the agentic infrastructure, there are a few core principles that we have to keep in mind. So firstly, I've been a big proponent of the decentralized AI because I feel like the mainframe era of the AI has arrived, which is, you saw the open AI, you see Anthropic and others. The question is, what's the decentralized architecture that can be done? It's empowering to the individual. The second part of that is the human is important, which means how do you think about human-centered AI? Not an AI that's kind of replaces, but figures out exactly the points of reduction of friction that the agentic intern can do while you do the core things that you are supposedly an expert or are good on. So I think we got to understand that because that's where the value is going to be the highest, because there's a lot of friction, by the way, in an organization if you haven't noticed, and those are the easy ones to fix. And then the third part is I touched upon a little bit is a lot of discussion on AI is about AI. I would turn the discussion more on the data, because it's, as I said, if you read the wrong book, you'll not be a good student. So if you want to learn something, you want to do something, you've got to basically read the right book. I think a lot of the data, there's issues with the underlying data within an enterprise because there's 100 versions of the truth, but then there's also perspectives. So it's not just bits and bytes. There has to be more layers of infrastructure that on the data governance and the data side that one has to think of, especially even things like data sovereignty, where data resides, and all of those elements have to be compoundedly built as a core infrastructure before the realization of the vision of this planet-scale agentic web.
And I think friction is a really interesting concept that you brought up here, as especially when you go outside of the enterprise boundaries into B2B, across enterprise or in the consumer ecosystem, the amount of friction can increase a lot, and perhaps agentic web can help there significantly move the needle. Now we'll do the last lightning round of questions, and it's a two-part question for all of you. So first, what do you think will be maybe some of the biggest disruptions or shifts, or what gets redefined over the next few years as agentic web takes shape? So that's part number one. Part number two is, given that, what should leaders do to prepare for the agentic web? Let's start with Rao.
All right. So what should the leaders do? Find that low-hanging fruit, build it, deploy it, learn from it. It's not just the technology, it's also your team that needs to get good at it. So get something out the door, and then keep improving on that. Disruption, you're talking about few years, that's lifetime now, right? So especially at the pace at which AI is going. In the near term or medium term, what I'm looking at is more and more of this autonomy being granted to the agents, and that is going to cause certain disruption for sure. Right? You're able to scale faster, be more productive, and the organizations will be much more efficient. Of course, we need to sort out all the governance, guardrails, and what level of autonomy we can actually grant. That will be the trigger for a lot more disruption.
How about Piyush?
Yeah, disruption, I think we heard so many wonderful things from a lot of leaders today, including many from the industry point of view, around new research in the field of healthcare, or be it in the social or environmental side. One of my favorites would be autonomous supply chain, looking at the current political and economic situation across the globe. I think that would be something which we'll look forward to and will solve so many issues for all of us. Right, and I think the second one is we should all contribute towards planning in terms of how do we make the AI adoption more secure, more reliable, and outcome focused.
And from my perspective, the way I've been thinking about it is it's absolutely paramount that AI stays open. And that's one of the reasons, I've been very closely involved with Nanda, partly because I feel like the vested interests of various parties and nobody is nefarious, nobody has bad intentions, everybody has good intentions, but there needs to be some neutral thinking about how do you think about the agentic web of the future at scale and keeping it open. So imagine if the web was not open in 1994, what would that have turned into? We run the risk of that today. So if you want to exhibit leadership, I would say this is the time in history to exhibit this leadership, because this is the intelligence revolution. And you want to make sure that you create a genuinely an open thing, just like what Tim Berners-Lee, and I jokingly tell Professor Ramesh Raskar, he just walked in, I have a magical thing. So he's on his way to be the next Tim Berners-Lee here. And because the point I'm making here is there's a place for creating an open AI, and that's the agentic web that we can create. But that's the leadership that I would request all of you guys to reflect on, because it's going to be a collective movement. So organizations like these, the get-togethers like these, are absolutely essential. And over the next year or two, a lot of this will get shaped up.
Fantastic. A lot there to digest and act on in terms of how to show leadership, rethink this from the ground up, and build the future of agentic web, and how it can reduce friction, create a lot of value for enterprises and their stakeholders. I want to thank the panel. I want to thank the audience. And let's continue this conversation as there's a lot to build. So feel free to follow up with all of us here. If you don't catch us here, feel free to reach out via LinkedIn. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.